Kyle, we can't hear you.
Let me try that again. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Macon. I am the Assistant Director of Student Success. Welcome to the 5 Myths About Studying in College and the Truth About Effective Study Habits. We thank you for being here this morning. We're going to do a brief introduction of everyone. I'd like to ask Miss Laura Brown. Laura, if you would, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then Roxanne, if you'll follow, and then I'll wrap it up.
Hi, I'm Laura Brown, completion coach here at Moore County. I hope the information we're going to share today will help you be successful.
Here at Moore County. Looking forward to this and hoping that you'll be able to take some good takeaways that will help you with your study skills.
My name is Kyle Macon. I am the Assistant Director of Student Success here on the Moore County campus. And as a team, we really wanted these webinars to be able to reach across all 4 of our campuses to assist our students. And we, again, thank you for being here today. So as we begin, I want to make clear what our webinar goals and objectives are for today so that you know what you are getting in this. Our first goal is to help students recognize common myths surrounding study habits and provide them with methods to study effectively. We want you, after this webinar, to be able to develop and create things within your weekly study regimen that can really help you and to dispel some of the myths that come with study. We're going to talk about why studying is important. That's one of our objectives for today. We want you to have a realistic view as well of what it takes to study as a student in college and the things that go into that. And then last, we want to share strategies with you. What can you do? Not just here's what the myths are, but what can you really do to make the most out of that? So hopefully today at the end of this webinar, you'll see all of these goals come into play. So here's the first myth of studying in college. I can study in college the way I did in high school or in school before. And this is a common myth. This is something we often hear as completion coaches here on our campuses. Students anticipate walking into the classroom. And I have to admit, I myself approached college like this the first semester I was in college. I thought, I could keep doing things the way that I did. In high school, I was a audio visual learner, so I could sit in class, I could listen, and I could watch what was going on, and I understood it enough to be able to repeat it and make some pretty decent grades doing that. However, when I got to college, I got hit with the truth. And the truth is, college requires a higher amount of reading. There is more text reading in what you do at the collegiate level. And so that's a reality that we're not necessarily used to. In high school, it may have been that we were waiting till class. Sometimes the instructor would say, hey, or the teacher would say, hey, we're going to read chapter 9 in class today. In college, you're expected to have that reading kind of done before you come into class. The other thing, and we're going to talk about that more later, the truth is it takes more time in college. Studying really does take a dedication and a habit built on your part on a daily, weekly basis to be able to be effective in it. And so it has to become part of your daily process. And then it really, the process of studying requires more responsibility on your part because you don't have individuals telling you, hey, you need to study this chapter tonight, hey, you need to study this chapter tomorrow night. It's implied or inferred. Instructors will often give you upcoming materials or will give you weekly reading assignments through your D2L class or even in class. And so you should take the responsibility to say, hey, if they're telling me I need to read this material, I need to read this material. And it may be that reading is not your favorite thing to do or that, you don't feel like you might necessarily have the time. And so really, there's a better way to all of this. The first thing is understand that college provides you with more independence. While it provides you with more responsibility, it does provide you with more independence. And that independence gives you the ability to utilize your time in whatever way you see fit, but ultimately the choice is yours. And so it's really finding a balance between work life, home life, school life, and finding the time in the day to make studying possible. And so utilize that independence that you have. And that independence also goes into the next thing here. A better way to do this is you really need to personalize the process. What works for you in a certain situation may not work for everyone. There's overarching ideas of study, but the methods of particular study vary from person to person. And so that requires some experimentation on your part. You really have to go through the process of learning how you learn and then utilizing and maximizing to that point. One of the biggest advantages you have, though, is if you work to not just retain, but retain and understand the material. Understanding provides a deeper level of memorization. And so it's not the actual act of memorization, but if you work towards understanding, it's easier to retain the material because you understand processes, you understand functions within particular subject areas, which helps you later on, let's say at test time. So if you're working to understand a concept, it's a lot easier to apply that concept when it comes test time or when it comes to writing a paper or a group project than if you just try to cram or work to just memorize the info. There has to be purpose and meaning behind it. College is really about understanding. And the last better way here on this first slide is you need to review your information regularly. So one of the things in high school was we may not touch information for a week or two before we come back to it and maybe try to cram before an exam. And the truth is we need to be touching on this information daily and not necessarily in 3 or 4 hour chunks. We recommend 2 to 3 hours of study outside the classroom for every credit hour you're enrolled. That doesn't have to be a continuous process. So you don't have to continually study for 2 to 3 hours. It may be 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there. Break up your study time, and we're going to talk about that time management a little bit more as we go along. But review regularly. You should be touching on this material each and every day. So that's the first myth. I can study in college the way that I did in high school, and the truth is that that's not necessarily true. You have more reading required, you have more time required, and then you have more responsibility, personal responsibility in that study. All right, here's the second myth. Why do I even need to study? I can learn everything I need to know in class. I can learn all I need to know in class. And this is the attitude that some of the students that we encounter or work with see. They go to class and they think because they're sitting in class that magically the material is just going to absorb and they'll understand it. We get a portion of it, but we don't get the full picture. And the truth is, studying, engaging in this material outside the classroom for understanding really makes the material that you deal with in class more relevant and actually helps you in class to absorb more material. The reading that you have, many times we'll work with students who come to our office and they say, I just don't understand what the instructor's talking about. They're up here talking about they're using these words and I've never seen these words. And our question is, have you read the material or have you been studying outside of class before you go to the class on that chapter? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. It requires that preparation going into class in order to understand the terminology being used. Instructors oftentimes anticipate or expect you to have read the material before you come to class, and then they're building on top of that material. So if you don't have that first piece, it's really hard to make what you learn in class relevant or make sense. And so reading the textbook material is going to be critical. It makes what you learn relevant. The truth is that studying outside of the classroom also shifts you into a mode from time-based learning, which is if I just study enough hours, then I'll get it, to what do I understand versus what do I not understand? Task-based learning. Where do I fill in the information gaps that I have? Hey, I get this concept about probability and statistics, but I don't get this concept in probability and statistics. So how can I fill this gap of what I don't know? Well, I go out and I start to do research outside the classroom on that particular subject, utilizing online resources, my textbook material, utilizing database that we have here through the library. All these things then become going, it kind of shifts you from being like, if I just study 2 hours, then I'm good. Or if I just study 3 hours before the night before a test, I'll be fine on it, to what do I understand? What do I not understand? How do I fill the gap of what I don't understand so that I have a goal, I have something I'm working towards. And this really leads you to understand the material more. You're setting through classes, you're engaged in classes, you're participating in classes with purpose and with reason, or at least you should be. These all serve towards your ultimate career goal or work goal. And one of the biggest regrets I think professionals have sometimes is looking back on their career and seeing their college career, especially, and saying, you know, I really should have absorbed this material while I was in the class, but I didn't. So I'm having to go back and relearn some things that I didn't understand or didn't know then. So how can we do this? How can we shift towards this new way of learning outside the classroom? Well, you need to develop a schedule. You need to create for yourself a schedule of studying. What I would recommend is utilizing a planner or utilizing the calendar. Many times your smartphones have calendars on them. You can utilize this calendar to map out your day to see when you have breaks. And then begin to set certain times within that day to study specific things. Maybe it's a review of your class notes. By the way, if you're taking notes in class, you should be reviewing them. But you're going to develop a schedule for yourself. You're going to create time, and then you're going to respect that time. You're going to stay within the confines of that time. And this is going to force you to begin to look at what your current study habits are and your learning style is, and begin to maximize or be more efficient in the way that you study. And I think this is where students struggle. We don't really think about thinking. We don't really think about learning. And so we have to engage ourselves and go, okay, this isn't working for me. Cramming the night before is not helping. Touching this material one time isn't really helping. How can I begin to study deeper to help myself? And so look at your current study habits. And then the biggest thing is stick to it. Once you set yourself a schedule, stick to it. But I'm gonna add a little something here. Be flexible. So if it's not working, don't be afraid to change or modify what you're doing to help you be more efficient. So that's kind of the second. Why do I need to study when I can learn everything I need to know in class? The truth is you can't learn everything that you need to know in class. And so the what happens outside of the class is just as important as what happens inside the classroom. Ms. Roxanne, do you want to take the next couple?
I will be happy to. Get back over here. There we go. So a lot of times I meet with students who believe that they can pass the class without reading the textbook. Now, this may have been true for you when you were in high school. You may have been a high achiever and high school was a breeze and you never had to crack a book. But the truth of the matter is when you get into college, you have a much more comprehensive type of learning. The concepts that you're hearing are much more comprehensive than what you heard previously. So the truth of the matter is you should not read when you are tired. And why shouldn't you? Well, when you're reading to learn, there's not much point to it if you're really tired because you're not going to absorb much of it, especially if it's something demanding. So you're better off stopping and doing it when you've had a good night's sleep. The goal of a textbook is to inform and to educate. And the objective behind this is learning that lasts. So buying the book and reading it from that perspective is absolutely worth it. Textbooks do explain big ideas. And reading does improve memory. And it's just like muscles, the brain benefits from a really good workout. Our brains will process information both visually and verbally more effectively. So reading will reduce stress levels and it'll provide mental stimulation for you. The more you read, the more words you're exposed to. So from that aspect, it improves a person's communication skills. A better way to read, I want to explain the 3-time rule, or the rule of 3. You may have heard it before. A general rule of thumb for college classes is that you should expect to study about 2 to 3 hours per week outside of class for every unit of credit. So think about this. Based on that rule of thumb, a student taking 15 credit hours should expect to spend about 30 to 45 hours each week studying outside of class. That is a lot. And if you combine that with the class time, that works out to a total of 45 to 60 hours spent on academic work in a week. That's not much more time than what's required of a typical job. And that's what college is. When you're taking on college, you're actually taking on another full-time job. But the difference is you get to choose your own hours. So why I say that, I'm going into budgeting your time carefully. It's very important that you budget that amount of time and set aside that amount of time and stick to it. Reading, recounting, and reviewing. You know, if a concept is giving you trouble, do additional reading, do additional problem solving beyond what has been assigned. That's how you're going to retain what you read. It's going to reinforce what you've already heard. Reading aloud and discussing what you've read with others is very important. That's got to do with participating in discussions. It's much more effective than reading alone. Active participation is going to help you retain what you're learning, and working together with your friends or your classmates, it can be really valuable in helping you to solve difficult problems because you get to hear ideas from other students, and that will facilitate your understanding of what you're reading. I also suggest taking notes while you read. When you're studying your text, don't just highlight it, underline it. Now, not if you're renting the textbook, but using a pen or a pencil to underline material, it requires greater care than highlighting. And so it's going to help you stay more alert as you study, and maybe help you remember some of the concepts that you're reading. So moving on to the next slide here. I hear this a lot. I can skip taking notes. My memory is great. Well, taking good notes in class is a very important part of your academic success in college. It's not just about memorizing material. When you memorize something, you know it, but you don't necessarily understand it. So that's where the importance of good note taking is going to improve your active listening. It's going to improve your comprehension of material and your retention of it. Memory, just memorizing something bypasses real conceptual learning, and you don't get to employ those critical thinking skills. You don't get to really analyze something if you're just memorizing it by rote. It has no real meaning for you, and you're likely not going to remember it as well because of that. A better way is always to construct your notes as a reference for strengths and weaknesses of information. Note taking is going to keep you alert. It's going to keep your body active and involved, and it's going to help you avoid feelings of drowsiness or distraction. It also puts information in your own words to facilitate your understanding because it engages your mind. If you're listening carefully and deciding what to include in notes, your mind's going to be actively involved with what you hear. Note taking builds connections and associations to material, binding facts to logical thinking. In other words, it emphasizes and organizes information. As you're taking notes, you're going to decide on and highlight the key ideas that you hear. You're going to identify the structure of a class presentation, for example. You're also going to be able to indicate the supporting notes of a presentation. And it's going to make studying and understanding so much easier when you leave that classroom. And it helps you to link classroom learning to your textbook readings. So it creates a condensed record for study. A set of good, concise, well-organized notes from every class session is going to give you what you need for study, for learning, and for review after class. It's very important to develop a note-taking method that works for you. There are many methods out there. You have the Cornell method, you have the outline method. But identifying which method works the best for you. And sometimes you may have to mix and match those methods depending on the type of class. Some note-taking methods may require you to have a more visual, I'm thinking of mathematics perhaps, or that difficult A&P class, something along those lines. So that is going to, Laura, would you like to move on to the next couple of slides?
Sure thing. So I can prepare for a test the night before is the myth. That is the biggest myth in my mind, because cramming doesn't work. And there is data that proves that cramming does not work. Cramming, there's a lot of time in the middle that you are wasting. For example, there was a study done that they put a list of words on the chalkboard, 20 of them. They gave students a few minutes to look at them, and then they erased it. And they said, please write down all of the words from the list that you can remember. Well, most of the students could remember the first things on the list and the last things on the list. So the stuff in the middle was lost. And that's what happens with cramming. You need a lot more stop and start time, so there's more beginning and ends, less middle. Cramming has a terrible effect on your body, makes you physically exhausted. You do not perform at your best when your body is physically exhausted. This creates a mental strain for you. This increases your test anxiety. You know, you stay up the night before, you're up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, then you're up again at 8 and you're pounding caffeine trying to get ready for that test, which again heightens your anxiety. So you really need to be studying in a better way, which is the short microbursts. So like I said, more stops and starts. This will equal more information retention. More rest is going to equal less stress. Less caffeine is going to be needed, so you're not as jittery. And when you're prepared, you feel confident. So confidence is going to be boosted, which is again going to ease your anxiety. So really and truly, the best way is the microburst plus more rest plus more preparation, which is all going to equal up to reduced test anxiety. So our final thoughts for today are that, you know, learning is a constant thing. And when you grow, you have to change. So you have to constantly evaluate and grow. You can't stay stagnant or you will not grow. You must utilize your time wisely, because if you spend 4 hours cramming and you've only retained 50%, is that really the best use of your time? Find little bursts throughout your day that you can review the information. And find the best methods that work for you. You know, one of the biggest things that I did that helped me was to read the material. And while I was reading it, I would make notes about things that happened in my life that I could relate this information to. That makes that associative. This is really the best way to do it, because these things are embedded in your memories already. So when you have something that associates to the topic that you're trying to learn, you can easily recall it if you remember it and associate it with something that's already there in your memory. This worked miracles for me. But find the best method that works for you. And please talk to your instructors if you don't explain something or you don't understand something. Ask for further explanation. And please, please contact one of us, your completion coaches, for all of the resources that we have available to you. And last but not least, make study a daily habit. We've included a few resources down here at the end on proven facts on how the brain learns. and the study of learning, and some very good YouTube videos by Dr. Stephen Chu. These go into depth about how your brain gets information and how information is retained. He has studied this extensively, and if you will just watch it and employ or use and employ some of these tactics, you will increase your grades and your retention of information. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the group?
Yeah, we'll open the floor for questions right now. Thanks, Laura. If you do have questions, please let us know. We'll be happy to answer them for you. We've got the group chat open, or we can, if you want to unmute and ask the question, you're more than welcome to go ahead. Okay, it doesn't look like we're getting any in right now. I do want to just take a moment and thank everyone for being here again. I do want to encourage you to constantly reevaluate what you're doing. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And that can be true of our study. Sometimes we approach it the same way and we're beating our heads against the wall saying, I just don't understand why I don't understand this. And it sometimes causes us or forces us to kind of evaluate what we're doing and really try to improve upon that. I hope this has been helpful for you. If there aren't any questions, it doesn't look like we've got any coming in. So again, I want to thank you for being here today. We will make this resource available to you all, and I will send this out to our participants today so that you all have access to this later. Thank you again, and have a great day.